is. And here we go.
And based on that fact, sir, and on the results shown in these graphs, would you identify the substance found in the blood on the rear gate as EDTA that came from a preserved blood tube?
No, I would not.
More EDTA.
And in your opinion, would it be scientifically correct to do so?
No, it would not.
Can I have another chart? I'd ask that it be marked Peoples 545.
545.
Thank you. Did you generate a graph to illustrate the results of all of the testing that you conducted on the 22nd?
Well, some of the results, not all of them. I didn't include the blanks, but most of the results, some of them.
And did you run blanks in between each of your evidence runs?
Yes, I did.
And what was the purpose of doing that?
Just to show that there was no carryover from one injection to the other.
Can you interpret for us the results, as soon as we can see them, shown in this graph that's been marked as Peoples 545?
The two blood samples, K67 and K68, which I prepared and placed on the sock and a cotton swatch, clearly demonstrate that EDTA is present in these samples. This is the amount that we would want to find in the sock and on the gate if we were to say that it came from preserved blood. But as you can see, the sock and the gate gave a very minimal response for this particular ion of EDTA. In my opinion, EDTA from preserved blood is not present on the sock and the gate. These stains did not come from preserved blood.
Now, you were asked on direct by Mr. Blazier whether or not you had tested any blood of Nicole for the presence of EDTA. Do you recall that question?
Not specifically.
Okay. Did you test a swatch of the dress in which she was found?
Yes, I did.
And did you test a swatch of the dress that contained blood as well as a swatch of the dress that did not?
Yes, I did.
And in your testing of that swatch that did not contain blood, do you show those results here on this graph?
Yes, the K65, I ran the dress, one that was an area that wasn't blood-stained, and the other area was
Hi,
blood-stained.
Michael. I
Now,
hope
you
you're
have
feeling
an item
okay
there on the
today.
far left is known as K65C.
Right,
And is that the area of the dress that you tested that had no blood?
that's correct.
Well, that has a higher reading, it would appear, than either the gate or the sock.
That's correct.
And what do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute it to the possibility that EDTA is present in the garment, either the garment or the dye.
Micah, what are you going to go out and stab today? I need to know how I'm inspiring you. All of y'all, what are you going to go stab today? I'm going to try to stab a nice steak. I won't, but I'm going to try.
That the garment is made out of.
And directing your attention to the bar just to the right of that, K65, is that the swatch of the dress that did contain blood?
That's correct.
Is it your information it contained her blood?
That's correct.
Does that bar appear to be higher to you than the bar that shows the testing of the swatch from her dress that was not blood-stained?
It's slightly higher.
To what do you attribute that?
Well, I mean, it could be attributed to anything. I mean, the instrumental technique, the way that I've set it up, cannot distinguish between peaks of that height. I really didn't attribute it to anything.
Okay. Based on the methods that you were using, it was your determination, you had to make the determination as to whether or not the blood in the evidence came from a test tube with EDTA or not, correct?
That's correct.
And in that regard, the method you used, was it effective and efficient for that determination, even though it did not permit precise quantification?
Yes, it was. I mean, in all the charts that I prepared and all the tests, I could clearly distinguish between preserved and non-preserved blood. On 2 of the days, the testing in the negative ion mode, which required EDTA to complex with iron, I got no signal whatsoever for EDTA. And again, on the 28th, when I performed liquid chromatography by itself, which EDTA had to bind with a copper compound, I received no signal for the EDTA. It was very easy to distinguish between the preserved and the non-preserved blood.
Can you tell us, sir, whether or not you confirmed with the full daughter spectrum on the dress?
The dress I was able to get pretty much what I call a sufficient daughter spectrum, and I think I dictated as traces of EDTA were indicated on the dress.
And was that the dress with the blood or without the blood? Or both?
I can't remember which one I ran. I would have only run one of the daughters. And I don't remember right now which one it was.
You don't remember which evidence stain you ran it on, whether it was a dress with the blood or without the blood?
That's correct.
But on one of them, at least, you obtained the full daughter spectrum.
That's correct.
And what is the significance of that to you?
Well, the significance is that levels of EDTA that are used in manufacturing can be identified with the procedure that I used.
So you do, now has anyone, no, strike that. You do then identify EDTA as present on the dress Ms. Brown was found in?
I think what I used was the term detected. The daughter spectrum wasn't the best. I could expect a little better spectrum, but in my opinion, it is EDTA on the dress.
As opposed to the gait and the sock?
That's correct. I did not receive any daughter spectrum at all in those two. Plus, I did not get results in the negative ion mode, nor the results from the liquid chromatography. In my opinion, EDTA was not identified, and those blood stains did not come from preserved blood.
Now, there has been much said about the variability of the quantification in the runs from
Right.
day to day. And I believe you indicated that it's true that a run will vary in quantity shown. For example, if I run a test today, it'll come up a certain level. If I run that same evidence tomorrow, it'll come up a different level. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, and it can also come up a different level on the same day.
If there is, now let me ask you about that. There is one particular graph that has been shown to you by counsel, and I'll fish it out later. But it shows 2 runs on the same day. You recall that chart?
Well, it showed a multitude of runs on the same day. Yeah, I think I remember the one with 2 runs on the same day. Yes. Yeah.
And it showed that on one run, you showed a very low level of EDTA, and on another run, a much higher level.
Yes.
Now, were those 2 runs made at the same time?
No, they were not.
What divided those 2 runs? What came between them?
I think it was several hours, many hours, and many runs on the instrument.
Do you recall whether that was a day on which you ran as many as 30 samples?
I don't know if it was exactly 30, but
Don't
it was
run on
probably
your
at least 20
instruments.
samples. I ran a significant number of samples on the 22nd.
Now, sir, bearing in mind that variability, if you run all samples at the same time, will the ratio you get between their various amounts remain constant or remain reliable as a method of determining the relative amounts between them?
Don't know that I understand that question.
Okay, let me ask another one. The machine varies from time to time in terms of the quantity it measures.
Right.
Does that have to do with the column losing sensitivity?
Well, it's more the mass spectrometer becoming dirty. The column, because of interference, it can widen the peak, and sometimes you can lose signal. But it's a very complex system. There's many reasons that the signal can be reduced.
Be that as it may, if you run all the samples at the same time that you are attempting to compare, they're all going to be either depressed or heightened to the same degree?
Generally, throughout the day, the runs would depress.
But what I'm getting at is a little different, sir. Would it be valid, in your opinion, would it be appropriate to compare an item run in the morning with a different item run later in the day for their relative amounts of EDTA?
Well, I mean, it depends on the amounts that we're looking at. If we're looking at parts per million, 1 part versus 2,000, you can certainly differentiate those types of analysis. If you tried to run 49 parts per million versus 50 parts per million, you couldn't differentiate those types of analysis.
Let me see if I can make my question a little clearer. If I take, let's say you took that gauge stain and you ran it today.
Right.
You come up with 2 or 3 parts per million. And then you run it tomorrow and you come up with only 1 part per million. When you run it today and you come up with 2 or 3 parts per million, and you want to compare it to a known reference sample, and you run them at the same
You really have
time,
to pull out the
one run after
cats.
another.
I'm
You have to
low
show that you
on
get
cats
flat.
now.
In other words, one being 100 times more than
We've gotten rid of enough that I am almost normal on the amount of cats in the home right now. And it's really weird. And Joshua, okay, if I am sideways and I'm petting Joshua, right? He will not stand for that. He will like jump up on his 2 paws and pull me so that I am facing him. He's very needy. He's so cute.
the other.
Well, I mean, it can be. I don't understand the question totally, but you certainly can do comparisons with ratios on the mass spectrometer.
I think what I'm getting at is, sir, Mr. Blazer talked a lot about the variability of the quantification from
Right.
day to day.
Right.
Does that affect the reliability of your results?
Not in this particular case, no.
Why not?
Because the difference between 1 part per million and 1,000 parts per million, the instrument can very easily distinguish those differences. We were talking on one day a magnitude of 4, and between 1 part per million and 1,000 parts per million, we have a magnitude of 1,000. So it's very easy to differentiate those types of differences.
No matter when you compare them or when you run them.
Well, I mean, you want to run them on the same day.
And why is that?
Because instruments do change over time. You don't know who else used the instrument. They do have electronics that have to be adjusted. You can compensate by running a standard to get the same signal, but you generally would want to compare samples run on the same day.
And when you compare samples run on the same day, do you have a valid comparison between the amounts? In other words, does it give you an accurate assessment in relative terms as to a large amount versus a small amount,
Yes, it does.
as you depicted in this graph?
That's correct.
Now, you indicated that you also did testing on a another form of chromatography. Was that the high-pressure
Liquid chromatograph, yes.
liquid chromatograph?
Right.
And did you generate graphs for that?
Yes, I did.
And was that done on the 23rd of February?
That is correct, yes.
Now, as a result of these tests, the high pressure? High
Well,
pressure liquid?
you can call it high
power?
pressure or high performance. They've both been used.
As a result of this third test, the results of this third test told you what, with respect to the question you were asked as to whether or not the blood on the rear gate and on the sock could have come from an EDTA tube?
I got the same results that I got the other 2 days. The stains in question from the gate and the sock did not come from EDTA preserved blood.
Now, I'm going to show you the graphs that were generated as a result of those tests. People's 546, Your Honor, I'm going to label A, B, and C, and et cetera. Showing you first 546A. This is the HPLC
That's the
that
better
right?
way to, yes.
for for the evidence of the gate stain, that would be 204.
That's correct.
Can you tell us what we see here, sir?
Well, you can see the peak from the injection, and no other peaks were detected.
All right, and then I'm going to show you. And what does that indicate, sir? That no other peaks were detected?
Well, in this particular case, no EDTA was present.
None at all.
None.
And now I'm going to show you people's 546B. And this is your testing of the evidence blood from the sock on February 23rd. Can you tell us what does this graph indicate to you?
Again, this is the injection, and that's the solvent coming out, and no other peaks were identified. That large peak is the solvent peak.
Which means?
That no EDTA was present or identified in the sample.
Okay, now I'm going to show you, sir, a graph run on the reference blood of Nicole Brown, people's 546. See? Might see. 546C. Okay. This is the testing on the reference blood from Nicole Brown, and would you tell us whether or not, based on these results, you would determine and conclude that EDTA from preserved blood is present?
Well, from this test alone, I wouldn't conclude that, but certainly there's indication that EDTA is present.
And showing you 546D. This is the testing of the reference blood taken from the test tube for Mr. Simpson. Can you tell us what the results indicate to you in this test?
Again, the peak at the end is indicating that EDTA could be present in the sample.
Could be.
Right. I mean, this is just a preliminary test by itself.
In this case, sir, having already conducted the negative ion mode and then the positive ion mode tests and forming the conclusion that EDTA from preserved blood was not present in the evidence stains on previous dates, did this test operate, this HPLC test operate to confirm or corroborate those conclusions?
Yes, this corroborated the fact that EDTA is present.
That's the question I was going to answer.
And not present
Ask
in the
him.
evidence?
That's correct.
And lastly,
Yep,
a chart
I've been
which is
wondering that
547.
the whole
Do
time.
you have a graph prepared to depict the results obtained from the HPLC run?
Yes, I did.
And showing you this graph, sir, does this depict accurately the results you obtained on February 23rd?
Yes, it does.
Can we make it a little clearer? Okay, the two known reference samples from the defendant and Ms. Brown are to the far left, sir?
That's correct. That's the counts that represent where EDTA comes out in area on the chromatogram run that day, indicating the presence of EDTA.
And the Q206 and Q204 that we see to the right of those for the sock and the rear gate indicates?
The sock and the rear gate did not give a signal or a response where EDTA would come out on those chromatograms.
And then to the right of that, you have a 5 ppm, 5 parts per milligram. What's that?
5 parts per million.
Million, I mean, sorry.
That's a standard of EDTA that was run on the instrument that day.
And does that indicate that you can detect an amount as low as 5 parts per million?
Well, I didn't use this quantitatively, but the range would be around 5 parts per million for that sensitivity of the instrument.
Then based on all of the tests that you conducted, the negative ion mode, the positive ion mode, and the HPLC, were all of those tests consistent and uniform in their result?
Yes, they were.
And in that regard, the result for all of those tests was?
That EDTA was present in the K67 and K68 blood samples and was not present on the sock and the gate.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess as far as the jury is concerned for the afternoon. Please remember all of my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations until the matter has been submitted to you. Do not allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. As far as the jury is concerned, we'll stand in recess until 1:30 tomorrow afternoon. All right? Let's clear the jury, and we'll have argument on some of the motions. All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter, the jury is not present. And we have a number of motions that have been filed with the court that have yet to be resolved. Counsel, what's your pleasure?
If I may interrupt briefly, just to mark some exhibits so I can leave them with Deidre, if that's all right with the court, because I don't want to lose them.
Certainly.
The legal page with a Post-it cut out on it, people's, what would it, 548?
548, legal page with Post-it cut out.
And the printouts that we did of the graphs put together, Your Honor, there's 4 of those. I'm going to ask that they be marked 549 through...
Wouldn't you rather append them to the group to which they belong?
I would. Can I do that without marking them as separately?
I would suggest that they be made a sub-exhibit of the group so that they're coherently in one group.
Why don't we make it then? That's a good idea. Thank you, Your Honor. 543 sub 1, 543 sub 2.
It'll have to be 543D. It'll have to be 544A. Excuse me, E.
Yeah, the 543.
I'll tell you what. Why don't you consult with Mrs. Robertson and we'll put it on the record tomorrow morning.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Why not leave them here then?
No, leave them with Mrs. Robertson.
We're going to need to restrict it anyway. In better, more good form. I got my hand in one of them.
Well, it gives it that personal touch. As you like, but leave the originals tonight with Mrs. Robertson, all right? Please. All right. What's up? I have a whole stack of motions here. What do you want to...
I'll get up and talk first. Your Honor, I believe the defense had wanted to...
I
go
also
over
have a
little bit
stack of motions.
the,
Well, I'm sorry, Mr.
first to
Cochran
read
was addressing the court.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got to the podium first. I thought that's what counted.
As we've, Ms. Lewis had missed out, Your Honor, when we were back in chambers, we indicated that Mr. Ullman will be here tomorrow, as I indicated to the court. So certain of the motions dealing with KNBC and Tracy Savage and Michelle Kessler, that's leave the court to go over until tomorrow, because, and the one dealing with, and the Furman motions, he'll be handling those. And with regard to, since Dr. McDonald will be the next witness if we ever include Agent Martz, we would ask the court to listen to Mr. Neufeld with regard to that motion. Thank you.
Your Honor, so that I may retreat upstairs, do you know what time for the Furman and other motions tomorrow?
At this point, it's kind of hard to say, since we have a shortened court day tomorrow, because the court staff is going to be attending the funeral. We have to finish Agent Martz. Ms. Clark, how much more do you have?
I don't think more than half an hour.
Okay.
It's probably a lot less. That'd be awesome.
Are we going to finish with Agent Martz tomorrow?
Oh, sure. Well, I'll be done with it.
Okay. All right, and then what do we have after? Then we need Dr. McDonald, correct?
Mr. McDonald.
All right. Well, my guess is late afternoon.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Neufeld.
No, I believe it's the people's motion here, so I think they
All
have,
right.
they have the burden. Also, Your Honor, I don't know if you've had a chance to review my submission. I got here at about 11:45, but for reasons that have nothing to do with this case, I was not allowed in to serve everyone at that time. And I wanted to try and get you the papers before lunch so you could have an opportunity to review them. It is essential that you review them before we have oral argument, otherwise the argument will sound rather nonsensical. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, I would ask that we recess for 15 minutes to give you that opportunity.
All right, I confess I came back, the stuff was here, I have not read it.
Could we do that if that's acceptable to the court?
Sure. Happy to.
Your Honor, before doing that, earlier this afternoon, I served a subpoena ducis tecum upon Mr. Cochran because we had information that a tape that is relevant to the case was given to Mr. Pavlik and therefore would be under Mr. Cochran's custody and control. And we did make the return for that tomorrow, which, given that Mr. Cochran is in court every day, we felt was sufficient time. I don't know if there's going to be contesting that subpoena or not, but I wanted to alert the court that we had done that.
All right, okay. All right, let me take a few moments then, and, yes.
One quick item. During Dr. Reeder's cross-examination, Ms. Clark was using a transcript, and she indicated that she would provide me with a copy of that. I haven't gotten it. I would just ask that that incomplete transcript be provided to me tomorrow so I have some time to look at it.
Absolutely. I thought they had given
All right, in fact, why don't you have it available? The indication was there is a copy available yesterday, so I'll direct that they give that to you by the close of business today.
I asked to bring it down that day. I don't know what happened, but I'll get it read.
All right, I saw somebody come in with a loose leaf notebook.
They got the wrong one.
All right, let me sit down and read this then.
I love subs. I just do. I just love subs. They just hit.
Good afternoon, sir.
I just would like to point out, as I'm sure the court noticed, that counsel's brief was 16 pages, and there was also
I was tempted to strike it.
no table of contents.
I noted as well.
I'd like to organize my argument somewhat along the lines of the three-pronged test that applies in determining the admissibility of experimental evidence. I know the court's very familiar with that, so I'll skip over some of the legal arguments that the court's heard before, and I know Your Honor has just recently read some of the cases in that area, and it has come up, and I'm sure it's going to come up again in this courtroom with respect to some other experiments. Suffice to say that the first issue is one of relevance, and there appear to be two theories of relevance that the defense has articulated. As the case law states, the court does have an enormous amount of discretion in determining what evidence is relevant, and as was argued by Ms. Clark and in our points and authorities, the issue here is one of the court exercising its discretion, and the standard on appeal, therefore, is the abuse of discretion standard, and that's the standard that the court needs to apply here in exercising its discretion. Now, first, the defense has said that this is relevant for the purposes of impeaching the testimony of Mark Furman. And it seems to me that that's a little bit of an oversimplification, because if all they wanted to do was to say that Mark Furman and Detective Van Adder testified that the glove was wet, and we want to, or looked wet, and we want to establish that it looked dry, that kind of impeachment on a collateral issue in and of itself would be so insignificant that it is not the kind of thing that most advocates would be interested in pursuing, and is certainly not the kind of thing that most courts would allow. So what they're really getting at is something a little bit more significant in their judgment than mere impeachment, and that is trying to put on evidence to suggest, I think, that Mr. Furman planted this glove at the Rockingham location, that more accurately characterized, that is the first theory of relevancy that the defense has put forward. They are doing this because Detective Van Adder and Detective Furman testified that it appeared to be wet. They did not testify that it was wet. They specifically testified that they did not touch it. And both of them testified that when they observed the glove, they were observing it with what I have characterized as being a pen light. I'm not sure if it really is, but it's a very tiny flashlight. And they are observing it initially under conditions where, needless to say, it's not very ideal. The court has been behind the defendant's home where the glove was located.
Well, Detective Furman testified under cross-examination by Mr. Bailey that it was a two AA cell mag light.
I think it's still a small
very-
little light. It's about 5 inches or so in length.
I have about 5 of them.
Okay.
All right.
And this does, of course, involve a subjective evaluation of Detective Furman and Detective Van Adder. I think it would be a little bit different if they had touched it with their fingers and said it was wet, but we're dealing with what their subjective evaluation of the appearances of a glove under very difficult circumstances was. And then we have to compare those, of course, to the subjective evaluation of the defense expert, who says that under laboratory conditions, presumably under ideal circumstances, after his test, the glove looked dry, and therefore say there's an inconsistency. Therefore, we should doubt the testimony of Detective Van Adder and Detective Furman. And it seems to me that that is a very difficult comparison to make. In fact, an impossible comparison, an unfair comparison to try to make. It seems that what they're ultimately getting at here is to suggest that the glove was transported by Detective Furman to Rockingham in a plastic bag, which was one of the theories that was put forward on cross-examination of Detective Furman, that he put it in a plastic bag and then secreted it in his sock and then later on left it at the Rockingham location. And that somehow the experiment supports this theory, because in the experiment there were certain areas, actually only a couple areas, where the glove came into contact with the plastic bag that in the subjective evaluation of the examiner appeared to be wet, notwithstanding the fact that they were in fact dry. So I guess the suggestion is that in order to get the type of appearance that Detective Furman articulated, perhaps it was dried in a plastic bag. But even the subjective evaluations of the evidence by the expert do not match those of Detective Furman, so I don't think they're relevant for that purpose either, because he only said he had this wet-like appearance in a couple of areas. And even under these conditions, it took 4 hours for the glove to become dry. And not even under the defense theory did Detective Furman have the glove in a plastic bag for a period of 4 hours. So even their theory of what happened, for which there is no evidence, is inconsistent with the experiment, because he would not have had 4 hours to keep that glove in a plastic bag, and that is the length of time that their expert had the glove in the plastic bag before making his observations. So we submit that it is not relevant for this impeachment theory, or this theory of trying to prove that it was planted. Of course, we'd also argue, as we have before, that not only is there no evidence to support this theory, but it is actually inconsistent with all of the evidence. We have accounted for Detective Furman's whereabouts during the relevant periods of time through other witnesses. We've shown that he did not have the opportunity to collect the glove. He has testified that he did not do so. And a number of people have testified that there was only one glove at the Bundy location. So this is all predicated upon a theory which is entirely 100% inconsistent with all of the testimony that has been listed in this case. The next issue of relevancy that the defense talks about is the question of shrinkage. And in order to determine whether or not it's relevant, I'd like to discuss in more detail what is actually the second prong of the test, which is the material circumstances and whether or not those material circumstances are substantially similar. Because it seems to me that there's some overlap here. In order for it to be relevant, there has to be some basic underlying similarity between the experiment and the known conditions at the crime scene. The first one that we already mentioned, Your Honor, was that the glove experiment took a 4-hour period of drying time, and that there is no evidence to indicate, of course, that the glove was ever in a plastic bag, let alone that it was in a plastic bag for 4 hours. So that's one area of dissimilarity. The other area of dissimilarity is the amount of blood on the two gloves. The testimony was that, I believe by Ms. Brockbank, there was slightly more blood, it appeared to her, on the Bundy glove than on the Rockingham glove. So apparently there was not the same quantity on both, but there is no evidence to suggest...
Very subjective evaluation.
It is. But there is no evidence to suggest that whatever quantity that was, assuming it could be easily determined, is the same as the quantity that was used in the experiment, and that's the real point. The next point is there's an issue as to the perspiration, if any, by the defendant at the time that he was wearing the gloves, and how that could have entered into the equation with respect to the drying time, to the shrinkage issue. Clearly, there was no attempt to replicate that during the experiment. And fourth, we mentioned the ambient temperatures. The defense tried to elaborately suggest in their responsive papers that to the extent that there were any differences in the ambient temperatures and the environmental conditions, that they were minor, and that they would favor a quicker drying period as opposed to a longer drying period. But that is not necessarily the point, because the point isn't necessarily how long it took the gloves to dry. The point is, have the circumstances been replicated? And it is possible that a quicker drying period could result in a different subjective appearance of the way that the glove looks after it's dried, or could result in more or less shrinkage. We just don't know. So to the extent possible, we want to be as accurate as we can in terms of replicating the environmental conditions. Some of the other environmental conditions that I'd like to point out is that I believe under the questioning of the court, Ms. Pilnack testified that it was foggy on this evening when she was in the Bundy location. Mr. Fung testified that there was moisture on the ground at the time that he arrived at the Rockingham location, although he couldn't say for sure that it was as a result of dew. We have a situation where one glove is on the earth. We would assume that that might have some impact in terms of the glove drying time. It may have been wet and then re-wetted. It might have been wet at one time as a result of the crime itself, and then re-wet perhaps as a result of blood flowing in the area of the glove. we have the glove at the Rockingham location on an area that was covered with leaves on cement, so we'd expect that that could have or play some role in terms of the drying of the glove. We have a situation where there's a lot of vegetation in both areas, and apparently this vegetation is falling down onto the areas. We had a lot of berries that were falling down at the Bundy location, staining the areas of the sidewalk, and an enormous amount of leaves, as I previously stated, at the Rockingham location. So there are a number of environmental variables that go into this that could be relevant, but the most important one and significant one, as far as I'm concerned, is the freezing of the glove by the Los Angeles Police Department after it was collected. And the defense says in the responsive papers, well, this isn't relevant because Ms. Brockbank testified that there was no shrinkage in the glove between the time that she measured it on the 21st of June and the time that she measured it shortly before her testimony. But what has to be kept in mind is that no one measured the glove insofar as the evidence is concerned. I don't believe anyone did measure it at all. Between the time that it was collected by Mr. Fung and the time that Ms. Brockbank looked at it on the 21st. Excuse me, that was of July, not June. In between that time, it had been frozen and apparently unfrozen because it was inventoried on the 29th of June by the police. So apparently it was taken out of the freezer for that purpose.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Goldberg. As far as the shrinkage issue is concerned, since I allowed the prosecution to conduct a demonstration as to whether or not these gloves in particular fit the defendant, you know, with the results that we all saw, don't you think they're entitled to present some kind of evidence to explain either how shrinkage occurs or how it doesn't occur? Since we all agree that the marking is as the internal marking says it's extra large. My recollection is that the tag says it's extra large. The internal markings inside the glove indicate they're from the same run. And my recollection also is Mr. Rubin testified that there was a internal marking that it was an extra large.
Yes, and as the court noted and as the defense noted in their responsive papers, I said that the issue of shrinkage is relevant. So as to that prong, we can at least determine that the issue of shrinkage itself is an issue that is relevant in this case. But as to the second prong, the identity of the material circumstances, which is what I'm primarily discussing now, we still have to overcome that hurdle, and that is an independent hurdle of the test. And I think to a certain degree there is an overlap, because if the circumstances are so dissimilar, then the relevancy of the evidence itself, or the experiment itself, becomes lessened. But at any rate, as I was saying, Your Honor, there was some evidence that it was frozen and unfrozen, refrozen, and then perhaps unfrozen again, and then refrozen prior to the time that Ms. Brockbank made her measurements. The other issue with respect to the materiality of the circumstances.
What we should have done is voir dire the jurors when we were selecting them to see who used to have leather ski gloves and threw them away after 2 or 3 seasons.
Well, I must confess I've never
Since
had
they're
any
all now
myself.
synthetic.
The next issue, Your Honor, is with respect to the substantial identity of the material circumstances, is the experimental conditions of rubbing in the blood for approximately 5 minutes, or I guess it was 5 minutes. I don't know where they came up with that figure or why they used 5 minutes. And it wasn't the issue of whether they used a latex glove for the purposes of doing it that we were primarily objecting to, but rather the issue of the manner in which the blood was transferred to the glove, which is clearly not how it was done at the crime scene. It could have been as a result of a direct transfer or indirect transfer, but the point is that we don't have any evidence suggesting that the manner of the transfer was similar to the experiment. And then finally, and we believe this is also a very important distinction, is that the defendant's gloves were 4 years old, as we argued. Presumably they had been worn, maybe they'd even been washed. They had probably been subjected to environmental conditions before. And perhaps that wearing of the gloves in some way made them more vulnerable than a new pair of gloves would be to the environmental conditions that they were subjected to at the Rockingham and Bundy locations. I think common sense would lead us to believe that that might be the case, and there was no effort to try to replicate.
The opportunity to show videotape of Mr. Simpson wearing gloves in the snow in Buffalo?
I didn't hear the first part of the court's question.
Never mind.
Okay. So at any rate, Your Honor, there do appear to be a number of circumstances here that have not been replicated by the defense. And then finally...
But isn't the point here that one application of blood, one significant application of blood to the point where they're saturated, doesn't account for what appears to be a significant amount of shrinkage? Isn't that the point of what they're trying to establish?
But in order to do that, you would still have to replicate all the material circumstances of these two crime
Doesn't
scenes.
the fact that they sit there and rub it in for 5 minutes, I mean, the jury is under the impression that whoever committed this attack, it was probably done very quickly to incapacitate two healthy, we all know to be athletic individuals. The testimony is that it took very short amount of time. By rubbing it in for 5 minutes, certainly that exceeds the amount of exposure that the assailant would have had on his or her limbs.
Well, I'd frame the issue just slightly different than the court did. I'd say that the issue is not whether a single application of blood can shrink a pair of gloves. Rather, the issue is what could have accounted for shrinking of the gloves in this particular case. And that's a materially different or significantly different way of framing the issue, and it makes the legal inquiry a lot different, because in order to answer that latter question, we do have to take into account the history of the glove, the fact that it was 4 years old. We do have to take into account the freezing of the glove. We have to take into account all of the variables that would go into the issue of shrinkage. But just in conclusion, Your Honor, I don't want to spill over the 15-minute time limit. On the third
But
part of...
I ask questions.
Okay, thank you.
If I ask questions, then you get a little more. All right, go ahead.
The final point in the inquiry is a 352 type of analysis, where the court is asked to look at the probative value of the evidence, which we say is non-existent for the purposes of impeachment, is virtually non-existent for the purposes of addressing this issue of shrinkage, and then against that probative value, then take a look at the likelihood of confusing, misleading the jury, and the unfairness that would result as a result of putting on this kind of evidence. And we suggest, because of all of these circumstances, which the defense has not been able to replicate and probably could not replicate, this evidence does not have any probative value in demonstrating what is the legally and factually significant issue in this case, which is what caused these gloves to shrink, or what could account for these gloves under these circumstances to shrink, and has absolutely no probative value on the issue of impeachment of Detective Furman, or suggesting that the glove was planted. Thank you.
Mr. Neufeld.
Your Honor, I don't have to remind the court of what transpired in this courtroom on June 15th, when the prosecution compelled Mr. Simpson to try on the evidentiary gloves in this case. It was clear to the prosecution, as it was clear to the viewing public, that the gloves didn't fit him, that they were too small. As a result of that, in fact, Mr. Darden asked Mr. Rubin if he could give the jury an explanation as to why Mr. Simpson couldn't fit into the gloves at that time. The prosecution later suggested, through Mr. Rubin and through other witnesses, that the reason the gloves did not fit Mr. Simpson in court that day is because they may have shrunk as a result of being smeared with a large quantity of blood during the commission of the homicides. Mr. Rubin, in fact, testified that, in his opinion, although he had no experimental data to support it, that a large quantity of liquid applied to the gloves could, in fact, cause the shrinkage. What happened then is that Mr. Rubin produced, both for the defense and the prosecution, identical pairs from the same style, from the same lot, of the gloves in question, made by Aris Isotona. Prosecution, over defense objection, then had Mr. Simpson try on the new gloves. The only reason to have him try on the new gloves, which clearly are not identical to the evidentiary gloves as they appeared on June 12th and June 13th, and they'll acknowledge that themselves, is because it was their theory that the gloves before June 12th, or before the commission of these murders, would have fit Mr. Simpson, and they wanted him to try on the new gloves to show that to the jury and make that point. All right, and the court ruled at that time, over our objection, that there was substantial replication of conditions to warrant that kind of experiment. All we want to do at this point is rebut an argument that they made. They raised the issue of shrinkage, we didn't.
All right, Mr. Neufeld, then let me ask you to address the two issues with regards to the shrinkage issue that I'm most concerned with, that being the age of the gloves and the impact of freezing and thawing.
All right. Well, first of all, Your Honor, let me simply say that they did raise 7 conditions or 7 objections which they felt we could not replicate. And I believe in our papers we replicate every single one of those without exception. I remind you, Your Honor, that Professor McDonald did a controlled experiment here. You even have photographic proof of what he actually did. What's extraordinary, Your Honor, and I'll cut right to the essence of it, Mr. Goldberg suggested that one of the issues, in fact, is the volume of blood. And as what you can see from the experiment conducted by Professor McDonald, that he poured a lot of blood into the gloves and then continued to rub it in, but it wouldn't absorb anymore, and then the remainder ran off. If he used twice or 3 times as much blood, it wouldn't have made a difference at that point. So we were being excessively cautious, if you will, bending over backwards to create the worst case scenario for this experiment, and I think he succeeded in doing that. In terms of the weather conditions, Your Honor, the only point I want to bring out about that at this time is he used a humidity chamber. he did use an experimental contraption to replicate the conditions of that evening. The prosecution's suggestion about the weather conditions, as I point out in my papers, is partly fabricated. There's no evidence at all that these gloves were ever exposed to sunlight. I think you yourself with the jury was out in that narrow alleyway passage where this all happened, and you have the house on one side, you have vine-covered fence 2 or 3 feet away from it, and then trees overhanging the area. Moreover, Your Honor, when there's a discussion about it appeared wet, and the officers were unable to determine that because he's using a pen light, and I'll defer to your own expertise on pen lights, Your Honor, but I would also like to bring to the court's attention that at the time Detective Furman claims he first viewed the gloves, between 6 and 6:15, the sun had already been up for a half hour. So there was a certain amount of ambient light, even though it obviously isn't direct sunlight over the gloves. So his ability to view those gloves at that point, and Detective Van Adder, at some time later than Detective Furman, certainly has enough light when they make that, when they give that opinion that the gloves were wet, appeared to be wet and shiny.
Counsel, you've shifted from the shrinkage issue into the moisture
I'm sorry.
issue. I was interested in freezing and thawing, but since you're talking about the moisture issue, what concerns me there is how do we measure dryness?
Oh, how does Professor McDonald measure dryness? In his experiment, what he actually does is he takes tissue over the gloves to see if there's any kind of wet transfer. And at the point where there's absolutely no transfer at all, and it no longer feels damp to the touch, it is deemed dry. That's the way it's done in the experiment. What's most important here, frankly, and I think the prosecutor hit it correctly, and I think Your Honor hit it correctly, is not so much dryness, but the shrinkage issue. That's the real relevance here. They made it an issue, and all we want to do is respond to it. They used the new gloves to try and raise the shrinkage issue. We're entitled to use the same new gloves to rebut the shrinkage issue, the bogus claim made by the prosecution. As far as freezing and thawing, Your Honor, that's pure speculation. There's absolutely no evidence in this record that freezing and unfreezing those gloves in any way causes shrinkage. In fact, the only evidence in the record is to the contrary, that from June 21st, 1994, when they were measured by Susan Brockbank, to sometime in June 1995, when they were measured again, there was absolutely no shrinkage, although it's admitted by everyone involved that the gloves were taken out, put back in the freezer a number of times. There's absolutely no evidence that that freezer would precipitate any kind of shrinkage. They produced no evidence that it would precipitate shrinkage, and we're entitled to rely on Brockbank's testimony that during that 1 year, when it was put in and taken out, it never shrank, to say that that's a non-issue and a red herring raised by the prosecution here. Most importantly, Your Honor, the method used to determine whether there was shrinkage. The prosecution suggests we're relying on the fact that the gloves were tried on one of Professor McDonald's assistants to assess shrinkage. We're not relying on that at all. In fact, what Professor McDonald did is something far more objective than has been done by any of the witnesses to date. Rather than simply putting the gloves down and using a ruler to estimate the length of them, as Susan Brockbank did and as Richard Rubin did, where different people could have the starting point at slightly different places and the termination point at slightly different places, he simply puts the glove down on the Xerox machine before running the experiment and pouring all that blood over the gloves and rubbing it in. Just puts it down on the Xerox machine and takes a photocopy of the glove. Then after the blood is put on the glove and after it is dried, and before anybody else puts their hands in it, okay, to stretch it out or anything like that, the glove is then simply put back on the same Xerox machine, okay? And it is photocopied again. Only this time...
Counsel, I'm not worried about the measurement technique.
Okay.
That really doesn't enter into the court's concern here.
Fine. Your Honor, I believe that every one of the objections that they raised in their papers is more than adequately responded to with sterling scientific controls on the part of Professor McDonald, without exception. As far as the use of new gloves goes, well, they were allowed to use new gloves, which certainly don't replicate the condition of the gloves on, let's say, June 11th. 1994, the day before this incident occurred, for their experiment with Mr. Simpson. There was no attempt to do that. And the reason Your Honor allowed that is because it's their argument that it's the smearing of blood and the ensuing drying that precipitated the shrinkage. And that's why they were allowed to use these new gloves, even though they could not in any way demonstrate replicate conditions. If they're allowed to use those new gloves, all we want to do is use the same new gloves that they used to show that when this amount of blood, and even more blood perhaps, is smeared in and rubbed into those gloves for a considerable period of time, and so no more blood is absorbed and it's all draining off, that after that it dries, and after that you do the comparison of before and after, and there's absolutely no shrinkage. And the jurors will be able to see that for themselves. That's the point. Finally, Your Honor, as to the 352 objection. 352 has been used a lot when it's the defense that's all of a sudden trying to raise what they call side issues that will lead the jury astray or into some new territory. That's not what's going on here. They raised the issue of shrinkage. They made it an argument, and we, as a matter of fundamental due process, Your Honor, are entitled to rebut their argument. There's a whole line of U.S. Supreme Court cases, Your Honor, which I'm sure you're familiar with, beginning with Chambers versus Mississippi, Washington versus Texas, and more recently Rock versus Arkansas, which says that a defendant is entitled to put on a defense. It's extraordinary that when this all started, Your Honor, the defense case, one member of the prosecution staff made a statement that it was time now for the defense to put up or shut up. We are trying to put up. But every time we want to put on a witness to put forward substantial scientific evidence to rebut their arguments, they move to preclude that evidence. If at this time, Your Honor, the prosecution is allowed to get away with precluding this experiment, which does nothing more than rebut an issue which they raise, then what they're doing is they're turning back the clock in this courtroom to a time where Mr. Chambers is being prosecuted in Mississippi or Mr. Washington is being prosecuted in Texas. And I know the court is not going to allow that to happen at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, as to the...
So I think the officer
No,
will respond.
15 minutes apiece. All right, as to the shrinkage aspect, I will allow Mr. McDonald to testify, the issue being whether or not a single application of a significant amount of the glove can account for any significant shrinkage in the glove. This experiment appears to be substantially, at least in a single application of a significant amount of liquid, to see whether or not these particular gloves will shrink any measurable amount. I think that's an appropriate thing to present to the jury, and I'll allow that. As to the appearance of wetness, I'm going to sustain the 352 objection. The problem here is that appearances of what appears to be wet and what appears to be dry is very subjective, and there's no measure for that. I have here up on my blotter right now many ink spots, some of which appear to be wet, but I know have been here for years. They're dry, but they still have a shiny appearance to it. The testimony was it appeared to be moist, that the fingers appear to be stuck together, and the photographs indicate that that's so. I think the probative value of that evidence is so slight, and the amount of time that we would spend going into the testing and measurement would be an undue consumption of time. All right, that'll be the court's ruling. Also, Mr. McDonald gets to testify as to the powder or red spherical things in the socks as well. Tomorrow.
Just for clarification, Your Honor, is the court going to allow the plastic bag experiment as well, drawing experiment, or the one without the plastic bag, or
No,
both?
the drying experiment is not part of this. It's the application of blood and the shrinkage of the gloves is what the court's allowing.
I will not listen to any testimony ultimately about how it appeared.
Right. Okay. We're in recess, 1:30. The Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Cochran. I saw Mr. Shapiro earlier today. Mr. Blazier, people represented by Ms. Kahn, Ms. Clark, and Mr. Harmon, also Mr. Darden. The jury is not present. Mr. Blazier, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. In order to avoid a break between Ms. Clark's cross-examination and my redirect, I'd like to make this motion now. Even though we called Agent Martz as our witness, I think it's apparent that he is not, that he's a hostile witness to the defense. I think that's not only apparent by who he was doing these tests for, but his change in demeanor after yesterday morning's session, as well as his demeanor during Ms. Clark's cross-examination. So I would ask leave of the court under 776 to cross-examine him in place of my redirect examination when she is done.
In other words, you were asking for the ability to ask leading questions?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Clark, any comment?
He was asking leading questions.
You didn't object.
That's right. I didn't. I don't see that there's any big change. I don't think that Agent Martz is going to be a hostile witness. He's been very forthright. Counsel's unhappy with his answers. That doesn't make him hostile. Seriously, you know, I mean, substantively speaking, you may not like the answer. That doesn't make the witness hostile. So I don't know what Mr. Blazier proposes to change, but I would urge the court not to make that finding because I don't think it would be warranted by the evidence or by the witness's testimony thus far.
All right. Thank you, counsel. Anything else, Mr. Blazier?
No, I'll submit.
All right. Your request is granted. Your request is granted. You're welcome. All right. Let's have the jury, please.
Additional matter?
Mr. Darden, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. We served the defense yesterday with an SDT for a cassette tape provided to the defense by Gretchen Stockdale. May I inquire of the defense if they intend to comply with the SDT for the audio tape today? As I understand, the court granted leave for Mr. Ullman to address all motions tomorrow morning. I think he'll be addressing that at that time, if that's all right with the court.
All right. We'll take it up tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. All right. Let's have the jurors, please. How long is this going to take, Mr. Furlong? It doesn't take long to capture, it just takes long to print it out. All right, the record should reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Agent Roger Martz, would you resume the witness stand, please? All right, the record will reflect that FBI Special Agent Roger Martz is again on the witness stand undergoing cross-examination by Ms. Clark. Good afternoon, Agent Martz.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Agent Martz, you were reminded, sir, that you were still under oath, and Ms. Clark, you may conclude your direct cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You are.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All right, sir, where we left off, we were talking about the high-pressure liquid chromatography test that you did on the blood samples. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
I believe you indicated that that particular test, the HPLC, was just a screening test that you would not rely on for any conclusion. You recall that testimony?
Yes, that's a screening test, and you would not use that for identification.
For identification?
That is correct, yes.
So there is a difference then between the kind of test that will give you some indication of what might be present versus a test that will give you a definitive answer that something can be identified.
That's correct, yes.
You were present during Dr. Reeder's testimony in court the other day, were you not, sir?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall when I began to question him concerning the work he did in the case that we called the Sconce case, People versus Sconce?
Yes.
And in that case, he was retained to answer the question as to whether or not the victim had been poisoned to death by the use of the oleander plant or died of natural causes. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
I'm going to object to this line of questioning about foundation. This agent has personal knowledge of any of this.
Sustained, but it's a little premature, but I agree with you on a foundational grounds, but it's premature at this point. Proceed.
Now, he testified that he used three tests in analyzing the autopsy tissues of the victim: thin layer chromatography, fluorescence spectrometry, and radioimmunoassay. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And I believe that he testified that those were the best then available methods to test for the presence of oleandrin. Do you recall that testimony, sir?
Yes, I do.
Are you familiar with those tests?
Yes, I am.
Have you performed them ever?
Yes, I have.
Sir, are those tests effective to positively identify a compound?
Well, I won't say absolutely yes or no. It would depend on the compound and the circumstances, and you'd have to review all the data. It's possible that they could under circumstances, but it would depend on the specific chemical trying to identify.
With respect to oleandrin, do you have an opinion as to whether or not those tests would be effective to positively identify that substance?
Objection, no foundation.
Sustained.
Have you ever performed any tests to detect the presence of poison, sir?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever performed any tests to detect the presence of poison such as oleandrin?
Well, every chemical is a little different, but we have identified chemicals that are similar, but not that specific chemical.
Are the same tests for the purpose of identifying a particular poison and of the family similar to that of oleandrin? Do you use the same kind of tests for that family of chemicals, poisons such as oleandrin?
Well, at the FBI laboratory, we primarily rely on mass spectrometry to do our identifications.
And in that regard, sir, do you have an opinion as to whether or not the thin layer chromatography, radioimmunoassay, and fluorescence spectrometry tests are more or less effective than mass spectrometry for the purpose of detection of poisons?
Objection, irrelevant unless he's talking about oleander.
Overruled.
They could all be used for determining whether or not it could be present, but for the identification, I would rely on the mass spectrometry to identify that chemical.
So for the purpose of identifying poison, sir, would the tests used by Dr. Reeders be most appropriately characterized as screening tests?
Objection, no foundation.
Sustained. Poisons is awfully vague, counsel.
For the compound known as oleandrin, sir, do you have any knowledge of the composition of that compound?
I've looked at the chemical, and it's I know it. Basically, I know what it looks like. I couldn't draw the structure or give you the formula for it.
If you, sir, were asked in the year 1988 to analyze autopsy tissues to determine whether or not you could identify oleandrin in those tissues, would you have used thin layer chromatography, radioimmunoassay, and fluorescence spectrometry?
Objection. Calls for speculation.
Ex-
Irrelevant.
To detect it or identify it?
To identify it,
No, I would use mass spectrometry.
because,
It's a definitive test.
and the other three that I've outlined are not?
They are not definitive tests in themselves, no.
Was mass spectrometry available back in 1988?
Yes, it was.
As a matter of fact, as of 1988, did the liquid chromatograph tandem mass spectrometer exist?
Yes, it did.
Do you know when it first became available?
Well, there's been many forms of liquid chromatography mass spectrometry. In the FBI, we've used various forms since about 1986.
1986?
Yes.
Now, you yourself at the FBI use a machine known as the liquid chromatograph tandem mass spectrometer, correct?
That's correct.
And if you don't mind, from now on, I'm going to say LC-MS-MS.
Okay.
Okay. Was that particular machine was available as of 1986?
The specific one that I use presently was not, but there were other forms of LC-MS-MS available in 1986. The electrospray was not commercially available, the one that I'm using in 1986.
Nevertheless, there were other forms of the LC-MS-MS that were available in 1986, correct?
Yes, there were.
Overruled, but the answer's already.
Would the LC-MS-MS, as it existed in 1986 through 88, have been a more effective piece of equipment to use for the identification of oleandrin?
Objection. Irrelevant.
Foundation. Sustain. Form that was in existence then.
What form of LC-MS-MS was in existence back in 1988?
There were several types. One was a direct liquid injection. They had a moving belt. There were several different types. Probably thermospray was available then. But there are many different forms of LC-MS.
Are you familiar with the manner in which they are operated and the substances that they can most effectively identify?
Yes, I am.
And would the LC-MS-MS, the forms that existed then back in 1988, would one of them or all of them have been a more effective means of identifying oleandrin than the tests used by Dr. Reeders?
Objection. No foundations never tested this.
Overruled.
Yes, the LC-MS would be a more effective way to identify oleandrin.
All right, let's move on.
Now, you talked, sir, just now you mentioned something about detection versus identification. Can you please tell us what you mean when you say something is detected?
Well, detecting is used in a general term in the laboratory. We have certain tests called spot tests. And for something like cocaine, you would do a spot test and you get a color and you could say cocaine was detected. But what you have to realize is there's many other chemicals that would also give similar results. So even though it was detected with that particular test, it doesn't mean it was identified. In order to identify something, you have to use a positive means of identification. And in the FBI laboratory, we use mass spectrometry as a positive way to identify something based on a full mass spectrum.
So when you detect, that means something could be present.
That's correct.
But when you identify, you say it is.
That's correct.
I noticed that when you were being examined by Mr. Blazier, he asked you specifically whether or not on one of the evidence stains there was ions consistent with EDTA. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And do you recall answering the question, yes,
Yes.
consistent with?
Right, correct.
When you say consistent with, do you mean that you have identified the compound, or do you mean that it has been detected? That is, it could be there, but you have not identified it.
When something is consistent with something else, it is not a positive identification. It could be something else. With preliminary tests that you do in the laboratory, there's a lot of chemicals that could be consistent. But in order to identify something, you have to have something unique associated with that chemical before you can positively identify it. And that's what a mass spectrum does. Some people will say that a mass spectrum, a full mass spectrum, is a fingerprint of a chemical. And that's why we try to do a full mass spectrum, to identify a chemical.
Now, in that regard, sir, when you discussed this issue with Mr. Blazier in Washington or over the telephone, did you inform him of the distinction between consistent and identified?
Yes, I did.
And in this case, sir, in the evidence stains and in your own blood, I believe you testified earlier you could not find the full daughter spectrum.
That's correct.
And that was the one, you could not find the 132 ion?
The 132, the 160, and the 293 in a certain ratio.
Yeah, I just foundational to the graph, Your Honor. Now, you indicated you tested your own blood on May 11th,
That's correct.
and you did so with and without EDTA.
Yes.
I'd like to show you some graphs, sir. And you generated graphs as a result of those tests,
Yes, I did.
and those graphs were made to depict the results that you obtained.
That's correct.
All right, Your Honor, I have a series of 3 graphs. You mark people's 549, 548. 549. That's what yeah, thank you, Your Honor. 549A will be the chart entitled Operator Blood, No EDTA Added, red top, with a start time of 10 o'clock and 21 seconds. Second one, 549B, Operator Blood with EDTA. The third one, Operator Blood, no EDTA added, time start 10:19:55, be 549C. Putting up on the Elmo, 549A, first of all. Can you see, we could just show him the top label, Mr. Bartone, so we can make sure that's what.
Yes.
And pushing it over to the left, if you can see the start time, what does that mean?
That's the time that the analysis began, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Now, these printouts all reflect a certain time for starting.
That's correct.
We talked a little bit about the variation in quantification that will occur as a result of the sensitivity of the column. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Is it then important to run all of your samples at the same time?
Yes, it is.
And in that way, will you get an accurate ratio? In other words, they'll all run in the same way, so you'll see them relate to each other in an appropriate, more accurate fashion.
It's best to run the samples very close together in order to get the best quantitation.
And the most accurate ratio between them.
That's correct.
And by ratio, I mean relative peaks. In other words, if one is very high and one is very low, if you run them at the same time, would that relative height and depth be accurate?
Well, it depends on your definition of accurate. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but the closer you can run your samples together, the better off you are.
All right. Now, is this the run that you did on May 11th of 1995 on your own blood that you had put into a red top tube that did not contain EDTA?
Yes.
And can you describe for us what is shown in this graph?
This is the reconstructed ion of 160, which is an ion produced from the 293 parent of EDTA.
Now, there is a peak shown there, correct?
Yes, there is.
What does that indicate?
It indicates that EDTA could be present.
Based on this reading, would you identify EDTA as being present?
No, I would not.
Does this bear any similarity, this test run on your own blood without EDTA, does this bear any similarity to the results obtained when the evidence stains were run?
These are very similar results I got to the stain from the sock and from the gate.
Now I'm going to show you, sir, I'm going to show you the next one. I'm going to show you 549C. If you can read that, is that again a test of your own blood with no EDTA added on May 11th?
Yes, it is.
Start time of 10:19 and 55 seconds.
That's correct.
Now, was this also from a red cap tube?
This is a repeat of the other injection. I just repeated the same solution.
And can you describe for us what the result is as depicted in this graph?
Again, there's indication that EDTA could be present in my blood.
And this is the blood from the tube that does not contain EDTA.
That's correct.
From that result, would you form the opinion that there was EDTA present?
No, I would not. There's not sufficient data to identify EDTA.
And that is because?
This is just a chromatogram with one daughter ion. It's not a full daughter spectrum.
And for the full daughter spectrum to be present that would allow you to identify EDTA, would you have to see the 132 daughter ion?
That's correct.
Now then, did you run your blood with EDTA added?
Yes, I did.
I'm showing you 549B, sir. Is this the graph that depicts the run in which you ran your blood with EDTA added?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell us what the result is shown in this graph?
Again, there's indications that EDTA could be present in this particular blood sample.
Now, does this have a different appearance than, than the evidence stains that you had run?
The peak is larger than the evidence stains.
I don't see any of those jagged random peaks around that one larger peak.
Well, the noise kind of gets buried when you have a large signal.
So does this graph demonstrate that the blood, your blood when having EDTA added, gives a strong signal
That's correct.
on the 160 daughter ion?
Yes.
Then the random peaks that you call noise on the blood sample of your own blood without EDTA, does that indicate that the signal for the 160 daughter ion was weak?
That's correct.
And is that very similar, again, to the evidence stains?
It's very similar to the evidence stains.
Now, on July 22nd, sir, did you do some further testing?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
I retested my blood, the same blood samples, and got similar results on that day.
Your Honor, I have here additional graphs. With the date July 22nd, 1995, RMM blood, no EDTA. I'd ask that it be marked Peoples 550A.
So marked.
Sir, is RMM on this graph you?
Those are my initials, yes.
And again, July 22nd, 1995, RMM blood with EDTA 550B. And showing you 550A, sir. I'm sorry. Showing you 550A, sir.
Yes.
Is that the graph that depicts the test you did on your own blood with no EDTA added on July 22nd, 1995?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell us what is shown in this graph?
Again, there's indications that EDTA could be present.
And again, does this graph also bear a resemblance or similarities to the evidence stains?
Yes, it does.
And in what respect?
It gives a low signal comparison to the known EDTA blood standards.
Compared to the known EDTA?
Yes.
And showing you 550B. Is this a test of your blood, sir, with EDTA added?
Yes, it is.
And based on the results in this graph, would you identify EDTA as being present?
There's indications that EDTA could be present based on the 160 daughter ion.
Now, does this graph, again, demonstrate the same difference that you saw when you ran the known reference samples that you knew to contain EDTA that were taken from the EDTA tube in this case?
Yes, it's very similar results.
In what respect?
It's a very large abundance of the 160 ion.
Now, did you also attempt to conduct a test that would tell you whether or not you could find EDTA after a period of time?
Yes, I did.
And in that respect, what did you do?
Well, I took some old blood samples that we had in the laboratory and analyzed those.
And how old were they?
One of them, I believe, was from 1991, and the other two were from 1993.
Two more charts, Your Honor. Entitled July 22nd, 1995, EDTA blood from 1993. People's
551.
Thank you. 551A,
Fine. A and B.
and the second one B.
Proceed.
Showing you people's 551A. Is this the graph that depicts your testing of a stain from 1993 that was known to contain EDTA?
Yes, it is.
And what do you see on this graph, sir?
Again, there's a very large abundance of the 160 ion.
And did that bear any similarity to the known reference sample stains that you created in this case, taken from the vial of the defendant and Nicole Brown?
Very similar results, yes.
In that,
A very large abundance of the 160 ion.
and 551B. Does this graph depict the other test that you ran on 1993 blood known to contain EDTA?
Yes.
Now, based on this finding, the blood from 1993 that was known to contain EDTA, did you form some opinion about how stable the compound is or how long it will last?
This pretty much bared out what I had suspected, that EDTA is a very stable chemical, and I didn't see any degradation of the EDTA over the 2-year time period.
Now, as a general proposition, sir, are the chemicals found in blood more stable when blood is dried or when it is wet?
Most chemicals are much more stable when they're dry than when they're wet.
So, for example, if you have blood that is deposited on a rear gate and that dries quickly on that rear gate, will the chemicals in that blood be more stable and more easily detected after a period of time than if the blood was in a wet pool of blood? Sir, are you familiar with the properties of chemicals found in blood and how they degrade?
Yes, I am.
And are you familiar with the conditions that will cause the chemical properties of blood to degrade or be preserved?
Yes, I am.
And is that part of your job, sir?
Yes.
And part of your training?
Yes, it is.
And in your experience and your opinion as an expert in this field, sir, will the chemical properties of blood be better preserved if the blood stain is dried than if it is in a wet pool?
Most of the chemicals that I deal with, they are much more stable dried than they are in a wet condition.
Objection. Move to strike. Non-responsive.
Overruled.
And the 1993 samples that you tested, sir, were those wet?
No, they were dry blood stains.
And were they what substrate? What were they on?
They were on cotton.
I have a graph, Your Honor, entitled EDTA Analysis, July 22nd, 1995, People's 552.
552.
Showing you People's 552, sir, can you tell us what you have depicted in this graph, in this chart?
Those were the blood samples, some of the ones that I ran on the 22nd.
Now, it shows on this chart you ran a blank.
That's correct.
And what does that mean?
Generally, between runs, you'll run a blank, just a solvent, to show that there's no carryover.
And in this case, does this graph depict that the blank was flat, no EDTA?
That's correct.
And then you have a 50 parts per millimeter, per million?
That's correct, yes.
And that, what was the purpose of running that?
Just to show that the instrument was working.
That it did detect a known standard of 50 parts per million?
Well, not necessarily 50 parts per million, but to show that it will detect EDTA and that it is fairly sensitive.
And then you have the 1993-1 and 1993-2. What do those show?
Those were the two blood stains that were preserved in the FBI laboratory since 1993 that were extracted. They were known EDTA blood standards, and they showed very high levels of EDTA.
Okay, now you come to the section that says RMM no. And what does that stand for?
That depicts my blood, which is not preserved with EDTA.
Now, is there some reading indicated on this? Is it a little bit higher than the blank?
Yes, there was some reading, and that was shown on the chromatograms we had seen earlier.
And that was where you said that there are some, you ran it for the daughter 160?
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Fairlow. And could you show us now then the blank? And then the last column showing your blood thank you, showing your blood with EDTA added.
That's correct.
On this graph, sir, on this chart, can you tell us whether the results shown for your blood, where it says RMM no, where you have not added EDTA, and RMM yes, where you have added EDTA to your blood, bears any relationship or similarity to the comparison of the blood taken from the reference vials of the defendant and Nicole Brown and the evidence stains in this case from the gate and the sock?
Yes, there's a very clear comparison. My blood that was preserved and Mr. Simpson and Mrs. Simpson's bloods that were preserved all contained a large amount of EDTA. And my blood that was not preserved and the stain from the gate and the sock all showed indications of the 160 ion, but in none of those cases was I able to identify EDTA.
Because of the lack of the full daughter spectrum.
That's correct.
Now, sir, in your job, is it unusual for you to discover new compounds, new chemicals?
I would say different, not necessarily new. They're chemicals that have existed, and it's the first time that we identified them.
Now, does the fact that you identify, would you say it's a routine thing to identify chemicals that you have not previously identified?
That's correct.
In that light, sir, in light of the fact that you routinely do identify new chemicals not previously identified, does that highlight the importance of refraining from identifying a compound until you see all of the characteristics that must be present, such as, in this case, the full daughter spectrum of 160 and 132, before you are ready to identify it as EDTA?
Yeah, it's very, very important. You don't want to jump to any conclusions because there are a lot of chemicals in the world. There's at least 11 million that are known, and I'm sure there's more. And a lot of those can have similar properties, and you must be very, very careful before you positively identify one of those chemicals.
And in doing so, in settling for, say, 2 out of the 3 factors, in this case, if you settle for the parent 293 and the daughter 160 without looking for the other daughter of 132, identifying EDTA when you see only 2 out of the 3 could cause a mistake to be made.
In my opinion, that could cause a mistake, yes.
Now, sir, when you were asked the question by us as to whether or not, when you were asked by the district attorney's office to look at the bloodstains in this case to determine whether or not EDTA was present, did anyone from our office tell you what test to conduct?
No, they did not.
Did you ever ask our permission before conducting any particular test?
I think I had called Rock up when I did the second test to make sure that I could use more sample, but that was the only time. When I initially conducted the test, I didn't ask for any permission from anybody, no.
And the reason that you contacted Mr. Harmon was to find out if you could get more of the sample so you could keep running tests.
That's correct.
You were not asking his permission as a scientist to allow you to perform a test that you felt was scientifically correct, were you?
No, I was not.
And if, in your judgment, sir, there were tests that you felt should be conducted and
I
were
think I heard
scientifically
Marcia
appropriate to be
didn't even
conducted,
object to
would you
that.
await
Is
our
that right?
permission before conducting that test?
No, I would not.
And if we asked you not to perform a test that you felt was scientifically proper and correct to do, would you accept that and not do it at our say-so?
Well, I mean, generally, I never really talk to the prosecutors. I just do the case. I work the case and give them the answer, is the way that I routinely do analysis.
And is that what you did in this case, sir?
Yes, it is.
And when you attempted to answer the question as to whether or not EDTA from a preserved tube was present in the evidence stains of the gate and the sock, did you conduct all of the tests that you, in your judgment, thought were scientifically appropriate to conduct?
Yes, I did.
And what answer did you obtain?
I was able to determine that the blood stains on the sock and the gate did not come from preserved blood.
Thank you, sir.
Stipulation?
Sorry. May I mark the chart, Your Honor?
Yes. Mr. Glazier.
Thank you, Your Honor. Excuse me, Your Honor. I hadn't completed. If I may?
First, you need to mark.
These were from yesterday, Your Honor. I'd like
All right,
to...
Proceed. Oh, I'm sorry. I was directing my comment to Ms. Clark.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She is the ultimate afterthought. I want to fight somebody
the charts,
right now.
that reflect the graphs that reflect the runs for the evidence stains for the full daughter spectrum 543E, which is a combination of 543A and C.
All right.
543F is the combination of the charts 543D and B. 544E is a combination of the charts 544A and B. And 544F is a combination of the charts 544C and D.
Fine, thank you.
And may I conclude with one last question, Your Honor?
Proceed.
Never mind, Your Honor. I'm sure it'll become germane again. I'll conclude with this. Thank you.
Mr. Blazer.
Now, Agent March, you testified yesterday that you had no bias one way or the other, either for the prosecution or for the defense. Do you remember that?
That's correct.
Is that your state of mind as you sit there today?
Yes.
Now, yesterday morning, recall my asking you questions and you answering the questions before the break?
Yes.
And you recall after the break, you changed your demeanor, didn't you?
I think I did, yes.
And by the way, during Dr. Reeder's testimony, you were consulting with prosecutors throughout the course of that examination, were you not?
I think, yes, I was.
And you were providing them with possible questions or issues that they should raise?
Yes, I did.
And you were providing them with Ms. Clark with instruction as to what questions she might raise and what technological issues she might raise?
Well, like with them, with you, anything that you asked and they asked, I provided.
During each break, were you down there conferring with the prosecutors, in this case, while Dr. Reeders was testifying?
I don't know about each break. I did confer with them when they asked questions, yes.
And you were conferring with them during the course of my questioning of Dr. Reeders, correct?
When they asked questions, I answered them.
And during the break yesterday morning, did you meet with the prosecutors?
I stepped down and talked with them, yes.
You talked to them about your testimony?
Somewhat.
And you decided after the break that you needed to be much more of an advocate, didn't you?
No,
Sustained.
Did you decide at the break that you needed to be much more of an advocate?
no.
Did you decide that you had to be much more aggressive?
I think I decided that I had to be more truthful. I was not telling the whole truth with yes and no answers.
So you decided to change your demeanor.
Well, I decided that I wanted to tell the whole truth.
Now, you indicated that the only other time you testified for the defense is in a case where 2 police officers were charged with murdering a civilian.
I won't say that's the only time. That's the time I remember. That's the only one I remember.
And during the course of your 17 years experience with the FBI, you've never testified for the defense other than that and other than yesterday and today.
I don't remember any other time.
When I met with you in Washington about 2 weeks ago, did you have a conversation with the prosecutors after that meeting?
I'm sure I did.
Did you discuss the content of the meeting that we had?
I'm sure that I talked to them somewhat about it. I don't remember the specifics of what I told them.
Did you-
I can't even remember the specifics of what we talked about, you know, all the specifics. I did talk to them after our meeting.
And did you talk to them about some of the issues that you thought I was going to raise and how you might confront them?
I may have mentioned something, but I was confused. As I told you when you came to Washington, I didn't know why you were calling me to testify.
Now, can you tell me one time in your 17 years where after you talked to the prosecutors about a case that you worked on that you called the defense to talk to them and explain the issues to them?
Could you repeat that question?
Can you tell me one time in your 17 years experience when you've met with the prosecutors about a case that you followed that up by conferring with the defense to tell them what you discussed?
I've had occasions where I've talked to the defense after I've talked to the prosecution.
Do you make that a practice of letting the defense know when you conferred with the prosecution about test results?
No.
Do you make it a practice to let defense attorneys know what issues they might want to raise with you or with other experts?
No.
Is it still your testimony that you have no prosecutorial bias here?
I have no bias whatsoever. Every question that you asked and they asked, I answered.
Now, you were asked a lot of questions about whether Dr. Reeders could have performed some of the tests that I was asking you about yesterday to validate what you might expect to lose by way of EDTA given environmental conditions. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Is it your understanding, whose responsibility when you design a test like this, whose responsibility is it to validate it?
The test validates itself, basically. You run standards and controls. In chemical analysis, the instrumentation is all established. It's been validated. In a chemical analysis that we do in the laboratory, we identify unknown chemicals on a daily basis. And the instrumentation has all been established, and the identification of a chemical has been established based on its mass spectrum. And we routinely do that, and that's what I did in this case. The validation is just to show that the chemical you're looking for can be extracted. The identification is based on mass spectrum, which is well established. But in order to get it to the mass spectrum, you have to extract it. So what you have to do is show, by using a control, that you can extract that chemical and identify it.
Agent March, your validation, your self-validation, how long did that take?
Well, I think I can't remember when I testified to the other day, but I worked certainly more than a day and probably less than a week in developing a procedure that would extract the EDTA out of blood.
And that validation concerned just determining whether taking blood from an EDTA tube, putting it on a swatch, and then letting it dry for an hour and testing it whether you could detect EDTA, correct?
That's correct.
You didn't do any validation study whatsoever to determine what samples preserved under the way these samples were preserved, collected, environmental factors. You did no validation study whatsoever to determine what, if any, loss you might have in EDTA, did you?
In this particular case, I didn't believe it was necessary. What I had was the best scenario. I had
Objection, Your Honor. Move this straight. You didn't.
Question.
I'm sorry.
He's answered the question. Next question.
Now, when I met with you in Washington, I had requested your digital data, hadn't I?
yes,
It had long since been destroyed, hadn't it?
yes, it had.
Now, you mentioned yesterday you were talking about the 1954 study, and you felt that there were some problems with that.
That's correct.
One of the things you mentioned was that they found 30 parts per million EDTA in the bloodstream at some point.
That was my interpretation. Yes.
Under what conditions did they find 30 parts per million EDTA in someone's bloodstream?
When they injected it into their, I think it was intermuscular and intravenous.
Injected directly into the blood.
That's well, one of the times it was. Yes.
How long did it take to work its way out of the system according to that study?
I can't remember specifically, but it was a short time period, I believe.
Do you have any reason to believe that Mr. Simpson or Ms. Nicole Brown Simpson had injected EDTA at any time on June 12th?
I would have no knowledge of that.
Now, you referred to that study for the purposes of explaining that they found 30 parts per million, correct?
That's my recollection. They found 30 parts per million. Yes.
But you're not prepared to accept the fact that the study found that only 5% of EDTA taken by mouth gets into the blood.
I accept the fact that that's what they found in that study.
And you accept the fact that that's cited in a textbook that's used in virtually every medical school, that 5% of what you ingest gets into the blood.
Objection, that seems that's not evidence.
Based on all the research that I did, all the latest literature refers back to the study in 1954, and that's where the 5% comes from. Yes.
You have no better literature other than that, do you?
That's the only literature that's available.
Do you have any, you don't have a degree in pharmacology, do you?
No, I do not.
Did you take any courses in your undergraduate in pharmacology?
Not specifically.
And your degree, is it in biology?
That's correct.
So you don't even have a degree in chemistry, do you?
Well, I have a minor.
Have you, do you have any kind of a degree in pharmacokinetics?
No, I do not.
You know what that is?
Oh, not specifically.
Do you know what pharmacodynamics is?
Not specifically.
When you read that particular study, did you have any, did you recognize it that it was a study in pharmacokinetics?
Well, I was looking at the paper because it was a study of EDTA. That was my interest in reviewing the paper.
Do you feel that you have the educational background to criticize that paper?
I didn't criticize the paper. The paper criticized itself, and I was just bringing that up.
That was your interpretation of the paper.
Well, the last paragraph said that there were some problems.
What did it say the problems were?
It wasn't consistent with previous studies.
We should treat him as a hostile lawyer. Delay of game, sir. Sanctions. Ooh, don't touch her.
Let me show you defense 1268. That's the last page of that document that you're saying has contrary data to the absorption rate.
That's correct.
Can we look at this on the Elmo again? Tell me where in that paragraph it says that there's contrary information about absorption rates.
It says the low absorption after oral administration is very surprising in view of the finding that the material is affected by the, I'm having trouble, can you focus that? Focus. Oh, is that what it is?
Yttrium and lead.
Well, by the route of, I can't read it on this. monitor
Let's try again.
is affected by the route in accelerating the excretion of yttrium and lead. There is no satisfactory, readily apparent explanation at this present.
Which part of that, I'm sorry, are you done?
Yes.
Which part of that says that there are different absorption rates?
Well, it says the low absorption after oral administration is very surprising because in another paper, they were able to remove yttrium and lead. And to remove that, you have to get into the bloodstream.
What did that other paper say about the absorption rate?
It didn't say it.
But your interpretation of that document, that says there's a different absorption rate than
Well,
5%.
it implies there's a different absorption rate because to effectively remove a chemical from the blood, you have to get into the blood.
Now, you indicated yesterday when Ms. Clark was asking you about possible explanations for what you found that's consistent with EDTA on the back gate and the sock, you mentioned an artifact due to the matrix effect. You remember that?
Right, correct.
Did you try to check that out?
Yes, I did, but,
Didn't pan out, did it?
well, I wasn't able to duplicate blood without being blood.
So you tried to check that hypothesis, and you weren't able to check it out, correct?
Well, in the time constraint, I didn't have sufficient time to check that out.
You told me, did you not, that you didn't think that was the explanation at all?
It's a possible explanation. We have several explanations, as I mentioned. That's a possible one.
You told me that you didn't think that one was likely at all, didn't you?
I don't think it's likely. I talked to some other experts that thought it was likely.
Mark, let me show you prosecution 544E. Incidentally, yesterday in the morning before the break, you testified that what you saw on the back gate and on the sock was consistent with EDTA, correct?
No, I didn't say that. I said one of the charts had an ion that was consistent, or if I didn't, that's what I meant to say.
Well, you set up the experiment. This is the evidence from the back gate, is it not?
Right. There's an ion there. That's the same ion that you would get with EDTA.
And the parent ion is there, isn't it?
That's correct.
And the retention time is consistent, even though, as you stated, your chromatography was not particularly definitive.
That's correct.
Now, the exhibit that we have on the Elmo now is the gate chart, correct, with when you were looking for the 160 ion, right, at the bottom,
Yes.
compared to the full daughter spectrum above it, correct?
Yes.
Now, that's the same sample, isn't it,
Yes.
in those two runs?
Yes.
What happened to the 160 ion in the full daughter spectrum? Is it no longer there?
It didn't show up.
Is it no longer there?
It didn't show up in the daughter spectrum.
Did you change the sample in some fashion that would remove the 160 ion?
No.
So
No.
can you assume that it's still there in the full daughter?
No. As you mentioned with the camera and Dr. Reeders, if you're looking at one specific ion, it's easier to see. But if you're doing a full scan, you may not see all those ions. But for me to identify a chemical, they have to be present.
Are you saying that the 160 is not present in the full daughter spectrum of the same sample?
That's correct.
That it's not there because you can't see it on the chart?
That's correct.
So it's your testimony that if you can't see the ion, it can't be there.
I can't identify it if I can't see it.
Can it be there and you're just not seeing it?
Sure, you can always be below your detection limit.
And if you had really been looking for the 132 ion, you could have done the same kind of scan that you did for the 160, couldn't you?
To look, yeah, sure, yes.
Did you?
No.
You didn't want to find the 132 ion, did you?
No, it wasn't that I didn't want to find the 132 ion. I needed a full daughter spectrum. In finding the 132 ion, it would be just like finding the 160 ion by itself. It would be a screening test. In order to confirm, I need all the ions together in a certain ratio.
You said yesterday that you would have loved to have had an internal standard, correct?
I would have liked it. I don't know about love, but I would have liked to have an internal standard,
You
yes.
told me in Washington you would have loved to have had
Well,
one, didn't you?
yes, one or the other.
And that would have made your test from a non-quantitative test to at least some measure of quantitation, correct?
I believe I do have some level of quantitation already.
Agent Martz, you testified that this was not designed to be a quantitative test, didn't you?
It wasn't, but that doesn't mean that you can't use it to quantitate,
What's the purpose of using an internal standard?
to get precise quantitation.
Now, you're aware now, aren't you, that there is an internal standard that's commercially available that you could have used?
Well, you showed me a book yesterday. I still haven't called the manufacturer to confirm that it's available, but did you do that? Is it available?
Did you look at the chemical description of what was in the book?
I looked at it very close, or I didn't look at it very closely, but I saw something that you showed me that you said was EDTA.
And would you like to look at it again?
If I could.
Agent Marks, let me show you, perhaps we could have a copy of this page, and as well as the cover, marked as the next exhibit, 1270.
1270.
I'm sorry, 1270?
Yes, what's the title of the booklet?
Cambridge Isotope Laboratories.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Agent Marks, let me show you from the bottom of page 49 of that catalog. Does that appear to be an internal standard available that you could have used with your testing?
Yes, it does.
How much does it cost?
You know what would be cool, guys?
$690.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that in the background. Let me move it. This would be so cool. I was thinking about this morning when I was driving my daughter. So we started doing OJ, and there was like 200 of us at the beginning in the preliminary hearing. We started doing OJ, and we went through the months. And that number has whittled down to like 67. So like 67 of us are still watching the OJ trial. What would be really, really cool is if you've watched from the beginning and have stuck through and are still here, just say something in the comments, because I know the 4 people who get in chat every day, the 6 people who get in chat every day, but there's 60 some people that do this with us every day. And the other ones might just be taking a break and they're going to catch up. You know what I mean? Everybody needs a break. But if you know, I'm not saying leave a comment to help numbers. Nothing is going to help the numbers on this stream. Nothing. I think that we all get to brag and see each other for sitting through the OJ trial together. So today after this stream ends, you can't do it now, but if you're on Replay Crew or after this stream ends, leave a comment like, I've did it, I'm here, it's me, so we know who the 67 people are. It would just be so cool. I know you guys aren't going to do it. I know. I've been doing YouTube a long time, and it's impossible to get people to leave a comment. But man, if we could all 67 of us just leave a comment and say it's me, and we just have that would be so cool.
How much would you have needed to use?
Oh, generally to weigh something you would like, at least 10 milligrams.
10 milligrams?
Yes.
How much did $690 buy?
Was it a gram? I can't remember. Gram. Yeah, I could have bought the smaller standard, yes.
And what did the smaller standard cost?
I can't remember what it... $115.
Speaking of counting with fingers, is this 3 or is this 3? And I bet this guy right here does this.
Mr. Blazer.
Now, you were shown quite a few charts by the prosecution, the red bar charts, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Mr. Robertson. You're looking for 552.
Anyone red. Let me show you 552.
I'm also going to try and remember.
You compared this as well as several other charts in an attempt to compare quantities by ion count, did you not?
It was prepared to show the dramatic difference between preserved and non-preserved
He's in my
blood.
shower,
Compare
Jude.
ion counts between one sample and another, correct?
I used ion counts for the comparison, yes.
Now, you've indicated that your ion counts can fluctuate because of the vagaries of the instrument by fourfold, can't they?
They did over the period of that one day, yes.
So you could adjust those, either you could make them 4 times bigger or 4 times smaller, and that would still be within the realm of the tolerance of your machine. Fair enough?
Well, that's a big variance. You generally don't get that large, but I would agree that that day it was fourfold.
Okay.
I got them. I can't wait.
Sure. With the court reporter, please. Proceed.
Agent March, you were asked some questions yesterday by Ms. Clark regarding why you don't belong to any professional societies that specialize in mass spectrometry, other than the one that you mentioned. Remember that?
Yes.
And the one that you mentioned doesn't specialize in mass spec, does it?
No, and I think I said that.
And I believe your answer or your response to Ms. Clark's suggestion was that you can keep up with current trends just by talking to your peers. Is that right?
Well, I think I can do it in more ways than that. I have 20 people that work for me, and some of them are very highly educated. I have 4 PhDs presently working for me. They're out attending a lot of meetings, presenting papers. We have a staff at Quantico, a lot of PhDs that do a lot of research, and we keep in contact with them. We're constantly bringing people into the FBI Academy for training. The FBI is constantly sending people outside to give speeches, lectures, talk, papers. Some of the organizations that were mentioned that I don't belong to, I've attended some of their meetings. I've co-authored papers that were presented at those meetings. So with the staff that I have, it's very easy to keep up because we have 20 people that are very aggressively do forensic science.
Agent Marks, does the FBI prohibit you from joining professional organizations in your specialty?
No, they don't.
So you could if you wanted to.
I am a member of one, and like I said, a lot of the people in the unit are members of other ones, yes.
Now, the papers that you say you published, that's the 4 that you mentioned yesterday over 17 years?
Well, there's 4 there, and then I have 2 papers that are being published right now.
Now, does the FBI require that you even have an undergraduate degree in chemistry or toxicology to become a chemist and toxicologist?
To work in the chemistry unit, you have to have a certain number of chemistry hours that are required. I met that specification. I had extensive training in chemistry.
More than
The
ready.
answer to that, no, that the FBI doesn't require that you have a degree in it,
Yes, either chemistry, toxicology, or equivalent,
which includes biology.
which includes a certain number of hours in chemistry.
Now, yesterday I asked you some questions about your the blood test that you ran on your own blood.
That's
Remember
correct.
that?
Yes.
And I made some suggestions about the possibility that maybe the EDTA or the EDTA-like substance that appears in your blood may have come from the tube itself. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Had you thought of that when you did that little experiment?
No, I did not.
Think it's a reasonable point to consider?
No, not really.
But you didn't think of it at all, did you?
No.
When you got the stain from the back gate, you never inquired at all what conditions under which that stain might have been subjected to either before it was collected or after, correct?
I think the only question that I had is whether or not DNA was identified, because in my opinion, if DNA was present, the EDTA would still be present.
So you asked no questions at all about the conditions under which that stain got there and may have been subjected to prior to collection.
Only that it was identified as blood and had DNA present.
So you didn't consider the question as to whether the effect of the environment might have any effect at all, did you?
In my opinion, EDTA is a very stable chemical, and when dried in a blood stain, the environment would not affect it.
You didn't consider that question at all when you designed this test, did you?
No, as I mentioned, EDTA is a very stable chemical, and in dried conditions, in my opinion, it will not break down in that short time.
I'm sorry.
In that short time period.
Is there any study that you're aware of on dried blood stains and whether or not the EDTA degrades with weathering?
No, but I contacted the manufacturer that makes preserved blood tubes of EDTA, and the shelf life of the tubes when it's in solution is 18 to 24 months.
Move to strike, non-responsive.
Sustained.
You aware of any study that anyone has ever done on blood stains, dried blood stains that have been subjected to environmental influences in terms of whether or not that diminishes the amount of EDTA that you can recover?
No.
Do you know of any scientific literature that's relevant at all to that question?
Probably the most relevant is the testing that I've done myself on some old blood stains from 1993 and one from 1991.
That's the test you never wrote a report on, correct?
That's correct.
Did the prosecution tell you in this case that you're supposed to write a report when you do testing?
In the laboratory, when a case is submitted, we will perform or supply a report. When we do research, we generally don't supply a report.
Move to strikes, non-responsive. Were you instructed that if you did testing related to a case, that you're supposed to write it up as a report?
No.
It's your practice then, when you do a test on something, even though it's related to a case, you don't feel the necessity to even take notes?
It would depend on the circumstances. If it's something that I can remember readily, no, I wouldn't.
So that the criterion you use as to whether you can remember it down the road, as to whether you write anything down.
Yes, I mean, if I can remember what I did, I won't write it down.
Agent Marsh, do you think it would make any difference on your ability to recover EDTA if the stain from the back gate was placed in a wet condition in a plastic bag?
It would depend on, was it in solution or just damp?
Did you ever ask that question?
No?
It's an important question, isn't it?
I don't believe that it is. I believe EDTA is stable, even in those conditions in that short time period.
So these assumptions that you're making, that nothing's going to happen to the EDTA on the sock or the back gate, given the conditions under which they were put there, collected, stored, handled, since EDTA is stable, that ends the inquiry as far as you're concerned. You don't need to do any specific testing on that question at all?
Well, I did test the blood, which is in solution, the known blood sample. That's the best control in the world.
How long did, I'm sorry.
EDTA is more stable, in my opinion, as a stain than it is in solution, and it survived in the blood sample, the known sample that I tested.
Now, which sample is this?
The K67 and K68.
How long did you let those stains dry?
As I mentioned, EDTA is more stable.
Move to strike, non-responsive.
Sustained.
How long did you let the reference blood that you put on your controls dry?
Approximately an hour.
How soon after that did you test it?
It was fairly soon the first
hour?
time.
I'm
Yes, that would be.
Jude, it's the thought that counts. So thank you very, very much. And now
Did
you
ever
don't have
make
to
any
do it
inquiry with
tomorrow.
respect to the sock?
Thank you.
How many times it had been handled by various experts, criminalists, etc.?
No, I did not.
Did you make any inquiry whatsoever to determine what kinds of light, ultraviolet, infrared, regular light, it had been subjected to before you got it?
No, in my opinion, it wasn't necessary.
Do you have any studies to back up the notion that, or your opinion, that light, different kinds of light sources, is not going to have any effect on EDTA?
The studies that I performed.
Any studies that anybody else has ever performed?
There's studies that show that it passes through the body unchanged, and that's a very hostile environment.
What does that have to do with light? Are you saying, let me ask you this, I'll withdraw that. Are you saying that because it passes through the body, that's enough for you to conclude that different kinds of light on it is not going to have any effect on it?
No, no.
Now, you said that by your own experiment you determined that. What experiment did you do to test the effects of different kinds of light on dried blood stains with EDTA in them?
I didn't do any specifically.
You were aware, were you not, that the sock had gone through infrared light? Or did you know that?
I think I knew that because an infrared photograph had been taken.
Agent Marsh, did you do any experiments to determine whether you could, as efficiently, remove EDTA blood from metal as you could from a swatch?
The only testing that were done per se was the gate, which was, that wouldn't count, but the can, I used one metal surface. That was the only one that I had done.
Now, you did 2 positive controls for the gate, did you not? The can
Right, yes.
and a swatch, correct?
That's correct.
And that was a swatch, a control swatch that presumably had been taken from the gate, near but not part of the blood stain. Is that what your understanding was?
Well, I had prepared my own control swab because that one wasn't large enough. I'd mentioned that yesterday, I believe.
So your control that you used for the gate, you didn't even use the swatch that they sent you? Was there a control swatch?
No, we had mentioned that yesterday.
So you used a swatch that, and you don't know whether it was the same kind of material, the same thickness, do you?
No, I answered that yesterday, no.
So you only ran 2 times. You ran that control that you just told us about that you made on your material and the can to see what your ion count would be, how much EDTA you got out, correct?
For the sock, or for the gate?
Gate.
That's correct, yes.
I'd like to have a slide presentation marked. Next. 1271. We have A. Agent Martz, it's 1271A on the screen. Could you take a look at that? Well, let me ask you this. Does that represent chart 4085, the control that you just talked about where you used your own fabric?
Yes,
And 4043 is the one you did on the can, right?
that's correct.
And those are 2 different days, right?
Correct.
And what was your ion count for the control on the cloth?
A little over 8 million,
And what was your ion count on the control you did on the can?
a little over 3 million.
And there's approximately a 3-fold difference in those 2, correct?
That's correct.
Isn't it accurate that one possible explanation for that is that you can't remove EDTA as efficiently from metal as you can from cloth?
Could I give my explanation for it?
No, I'll let you give that one next. Is that one reasonable explanation that I gave you?
I don't believe that that's a reasonable explanation, no.
Did you test that hypothesis at all?
No?
Now, your explanation is what? That it's the variation in the machine?
Well, it's variation over the day, and as I mentioned, when I do a control, whenever I perform this experiment, we're cutting a piece of a fabric, okay? I don't know, or on that day, the size that I cut, the control is going to be the same size as the known, or the Q and the known are going to be the same size. On a different day, I may cut something a little larger, a little smaller. I didn't have a particular instrument or a scale to weigh the exact size that I took. So what I took was relative sizes. And the size the one day could have been larger than the size the other day, plus the instrumental conditions. Those would be my explanation as to the difference in the ion count.
Agent Marks, did you write down in your work papers that you use different sizes in different tests?
No.
Why didn't you write that down? If you changed the conditions from one test to the next, why didn't you write that down?
As I mentioned, I didn't change
Thank
the
you,
conditions
Nikki.
comparing the K to
Drive
the Q. That's what
safe.
was relevant here, to determine whether or not the stains came from preserved or non-preserved blood. So I prepared those the same each time.
You wrote down, when you did your first test on February 22nd, the sizes of the samples that you used, the size of the swatches, and you wrote down that information, didn't you?
Well, I said approximate.
But you didn't write anything down for February 28th showing that you had changed the conditions using different sizes.
Well, I mean, it would be impossible for me to cut the exact same size stain. I didn't see any reason to write that down.
Now, does that fall in the category of something that you remembered you changed it, so you didn't need to write it down?
Well, I think it's obvious that I can't cut the exact same size of stain, and I mentioned that earlier, and that's why I always cut a larger amount of the question stain than I did the known. Now, when I'm cutting them right in front of me at the same time, I can see that. Now, 5 days later, 10 days later, when I'm cutting, I don't have those in front of me anymore. I'm approximating the size that I'm cutting.
So you might have actually cut a bigger swatch when you did the can experiment on the 28th than you had for the positive control on the 22nd.
Based on my results, I would say no.
So you're using your results to bootstrap and find and say that you must have used a smaller sample because of the results.
To me, it's immaterial as long as I use the same size each day.
It couldn't be the result of you not being able to remove EDTA from metal as efficiently as you can from a swatch.
Not in my opinion. That would not be the possibility.
Can we have slide B, please? Now, Agent Martz, on the 28th, you tested the gate, the evidence, the bloodstain evidence from the gate, did you not?
Yes.
And this is the same positive control. This is your can experiment, correct?
Yes.
And you did those very close together, didn't you? In time.
Yes.
And your ion count for the can was about 3 million?
That's correct.
And what was your ion count for the evidence?
Approximately 200,000. Was it 220,000? 221,000? Yes.
Now, you didn't make a chart that showed those experiments on the 28th for the prosecution, did you?
I don't believe I did, no.
That doesn't look like a 1,000-fold difference, does it?
No.
Now, Agent Martz, would you agree that all of these charts that you made for the prosecution have as their basis an underlying assumption that you're using the same amount of blood from the evidence as you are using in the control?
Well, I tried to approximate it, but you got to remember here that I'm taking blood off of a surface, and I don't specifically remember how much I took off.
Wouldn't it be very misleading to put two figures on a chart when they're based on different starting amounts?
Well, As I mentioned earlier, when I cut a stain, it's very easy. You can see it. But when I took a stain off of a can, I removed it with a cotton swatch.
Move to
And-
strike, I'm sorry, move to strike, non-responsive.
Answer stricken.
Wouldn't it be very misleading to put together a chart when you're starting, when you have different starting amounts for the components of that chart?
I don't believe so.
Now, you testified that your ion counts can fluctuate by as much as 4 times because of the machinery, correct?
I testify they fluctuated that amount on the one particular day.
And I want you to assume hypothetically for just a moment that, well, let me ask you this. What's your assumption in terms of how much blood you used for the evidence sample on February 28th for the gate?
It was larger than the minimum amount that I required, which is the 1 millimeter squared.
How much larger?
It was probably approximately probably 1.5 by 1.5.
Which is how many square millimeters?
Well, 1.5 square millimeter.
1.5 squared?
Right.
Which, and you had determined that the minimum size swatch that you needed to use to get a detectable amount was 1 square millimeter?
Well, that was based on negative ion, so for positive ion, I would need 1/10 of that. So it would be a very, very small.
You calculated what size swatch you needed for these tests to have a minimum detectable amount of EDTA blood, did you not?
For negative ion, yes.
And you didn't do any different calculation for positive ion, did you?
No, but based on the fact that the positive ion is 10 times stronger, or 10 times, has 10 times the ability to detect it, then I would need 1/10 the size stain.
I want you to assume, for purposes of a hypothetical, that your estimate of the quantity of the blood that you used from the blood stain was only 1/4 of what you thought it was. Do you have that in mind?
Yes,
And obviously, if you used much less blood, you would expect a lower ion count, wouldn't you?
that's correct.
Now, could we have chart C, please?
Objections on this. 2 different days that are misleading.
Agent Marks, this is the same day, isn't it, the 28th? These 2 tests, aren't they?
Well, that's what's labeled, yes.
Now, would you agree that if you
Objection, assume facts not evidence. May the witness be shown the underlying graphs, Your Honor?
you feel the need to check your data, Agent Marks?
Are these the areas or the peak heights
Areas.
areas? And what's the first sample, the gate one?
The gate and your can.
Okay.
If you had overestimated the amount of blood from the evidence that you started with it by 4, then it would not be unreasonable to assume that your ion count should be 4 times higher to make the same, to equate the amounts together. Correct?
Can I look at my data?
Sure. This is the same sample from the earlier chart where you got,
Now, the one you've got labeled positive control 4043, you said that was my area?
that was your can. No, this is your can reduced. Well, okay, I haven't finished the whole chart, so let's talk about the gate first.
Okay.
You got an ion count of 210,000, correct? Remember from the earlier chart?
Now, when you refer to 4049,
Yes.
I have a different chart labeled 4049.
Well, you had okay, what's your ion count on 4049?
200,000.
Okay, and that's the one we were just talking about from the last chart, correct?
Okay.
Now, my hypothetical is that you've overestimated the amount of blood by a factor of 4.
So this is not my data?
This is 4 times your data to adjust for the quantities.
Objection.
Now, I don't understand what you're trying.
Well, okay, let me ask it this way. If you got 210,000 ion count from a half a microliter of blood, would it be reasonable to assume that you might get in the range of 800,000 from 2 microliters of blood?
No, because we had mentioned once before this could be a matrix effect. We don't know what that is or where it's from. You can't assume that.
You can't assume that if you use 4 times more blood from the evidence that you'd get 4 times higher ion count?
No.
How much more would you get?
It depends on what this compound is and the source of it. I told you I don't know what it is and I don't know the source.
All right, let's assume hypothetically that 4 times as much blood is going to give you 4 times as much EDTA. Can we assume that, if it's EDTA blood to start with?
Yes.
And the range of your measurement ability on your positive controls as well as the gate, you could have a 4-fold difference in ion count. Now, if you got an ion count of 8 million, or I'm sorry, 3 million on that control, correct?
Yes.
1/4 of that is 750,000, isn't it?
Yes.
So under that assumption of those different conditions which are within the realm of your experimental basis, you might get, it appears that you get the same quantity in terms of ion count from the evidence as you got from the known EDTA blood, doesn't it?
No, I would disagree with that.
Are my numbers wrong?
Well, you're taking both numbers and moving them 4 times. You can't do that. That's a factor of 8 then.
Well, I'm moving the gate 4 times based on quantity, not on the machine, the variance of the machine.
Well, I don't see how you can do that.
Okay. Now, did you take the same amount of care with everything that you did in your experiments? I mean, did you try to be as careful as possible with everything you did?
Yes.
Of course he did. It's OJ trial. Of course he would try to be careful, right? I just cheated and fast forwarded it to the end, and he is on this video until the end. So we are definitely going to see him tomorrow. I don't know about the next day because we have 2 hours tomorrow, so we might get through him, and we might get another witness. It's impossible to tell from the thumbs if we get a new witness soon, but I can tell you tomorrow Marcia's up, and tomorrow is the last part of July 26th. So, but tomorrow it's only 30 minutes long, so we might have him just for a little bit, and then July 27th starts, and Bailey is up, so we would have to be a different witness, or at least a break from the trial so that the lawyers can fight with each other. I can't remember this lawyer's name. I'm sorry, I can't remember this lawyer's name, but he's back up again for the last part of July 27th. So that means it's possible this guy is on for that too. But then we have all different lawyers and witnesses coming for up until the end of July. Oh, end of July. Oh my gosh, I can't believe how far we're going. Every day feels bigger now. Like we got so far. All right, I'm gonna let you all go. I will see you all again very soon. I hope that you guys have a great day. You too, Malta. Bye.